Welcome to Puck Talk CS. I'm Matthew Mugno alongside Steve Murno, my pal. He's going to be here at this series for Game 5. Threw some cash down on that Hurricanes series, and it looks like he'll be in person. I've never been to a playoff game myself. Now, with that, the New York Rangers are playing the Florida Panthers. Here's our Eastern Conference Final series preview. Steve, this is a big series for the Rangers. A lot of fans believe, and a lot of people, media included, believe that Hurricane series was going to be a series that tested both teams to the limit. We saw the way it went. 3 games, they come out and win, push for the sweep, lose 2, win Game 6 on the road. Chris Kreider legacy game. I think this is going to be their biggest test. Obviously, I think in the postseason, every time you make it to a new round, there's a big test. But it looks like all 4 of the best teams in the postseason are in their respective conference finals. This is, I think, what everyone was licking their chops for, though. New York Rangers, Florida Panthers.
Yeah, I don't know. You made a good point there. I don't know whether it's the President's Trophy curse or whether it's the odds makers simply just underestimating the Rangers like they've done all season long. But listen, I say the value keep coming. Rangers in the series are the favorite against the Panthers again. So they're plus money. If you're a bettor, I'd look there. So Chives, let's do it. Let's talk some puck.
Well, Steve, let's start with a nice stat find you actually spurred me to look into. And we talk about the depth of the Florida Panthers offense. That's first and foremost because the Rangers lineup, their practice is actually at the time we're recording this going on right now. Updates are coming through, but it's good. The practice is over. So I think most of what the media has reported is done, considering the game is tomorrow. Florida Panthers lineup: Vladimir Tarasenko, Barkov, Reinhart, Verhaeghe, Lundell, Kachuk, Luostarinen, Bennett, Rodriguez, Lomberg, Stenlund, Cousins, Forsling, Ekblad, Mikola, Montour, OEL, Dmitry Kulikov, Bob in net. I mean, they are top to bottom, up and down, solid. I didn't even know Sandpaper Bennett was their 3C. Reinhart has, I think it's like up to 64 goals combined between the regular season and playoffs. Barkov's playing his best hockey. Steve-O, the stat you spurred me to find, what I was saying just a moment ago, Sam Reinhart had 4 goals and an assist against the Rangers in his unreal campaign as an unrestricted free agent. The Rangers are going to have their hands full with this offense, whether it's Matt Kachuk, Sam Reinhart, or the depth of the Panthers team.
Yeah, I'm exhausted just listening to you go up and down that lineup, but that's just a testament to what the Rangers are going to have to face. It's going to be exhausting to play a full 60 minutes, even more too, against Florida. It's going to be this is an all on hands deck group that executes a tight checking approach. They capitalize on off scoring chances. They initiate very swift zone exits, and they keep opponents on their heels. They have strong puck possession. They scrape for the battles, and this is a Florida team. When you look in the regular season, this was a Florida team that led the league in altercations after the whistle. They led the league in most hits for a team. This is a very physical team, and I think the only team that was better than Florida in the regular season in shot differential at even strength in the regular season was the Carolina Hurricanes, Chives. And I think the Rangers obviously proved that they can hang with the toughest defensive challenge in the game. And again, I really do think we need to channel our approach a little bit. We talked about it here with Mike on these last few episodes, even going back to that Washington Capitals series. We kind of had the urge that this team could have been a little bit more physical, and this is a team that we're going to have to bring it. Because, again, like I said, they lead the league in hits in the regular season. They lead the league in post scrubs, line altercations, after the whistle, whatever you want to call it. But let's go back to that line brawl against the Devils, at the end of the regular season. We proved that we are more than capable of getting our hands dirty. So I think that's going to be a huge, huge point that I think is going to be underestimated in this series. The question for me is, will the Rangers match that physicality? Because we didn't really see it that much in the series against the Hurricanes. The question, Chives, is will the Rangers bring that same toughness?
As our boy Base Shesty would say, shout out our guy Base Shesty. how will you respond, right? We thought that Caps sweep, we thought that could potentially be a short series, and it felt like it. It didn't really feel like the playoff hockey New York Ranger observers are used to watching. Then they have days off. You figure they rest up. Now they play Carolina. Carolina, they were relentless on pucks. The Rangers were physical in the first half of the series. I think what we didn't see in games 5 and 6, and we talked about this on the last episode, I felt they just didn't want to take a penalty with how tight that series was being called by the officials. With that, though, they're going to need to turn that back on. And like you mentioned with the line brawl, they are capable of turning that on and turning that off. They have the discipline to. So I think that's one thing to note. The second thing to note, talk about scoring. We talked about Sam Reinhart at the Open. The Florida Panthers can put the puck in the net. I feel they're a more dangerous version of Carolina because Carolina is well conditioned, but the Panthers are aggressive. They might not be the fastest team, but they bang bodies and they get pucks in the back of the net, and it doesn't matter who it's from. So I think that it's that rare combination that they have the skill, but they also have the grit that makes them a tough out, especially in a conference final series. They were there last year. The Rangers were there now 2 conference final appearances in the last 3 seasons and against 2 very strong opponents. So to start with goaltending as well, what's your outlook on Bobrovsky versus Igor?
Yeah, listen, I thought, and we go back, Charles, we are money with these calls. That game against Florida, the final game of the regular season, I thought we both said this is the team and this is the game we have to win in order to give us confidence because Florida was the only team in the NHL that the Rangers hadn't beat prior to the end of the regular season. And I think it's only fitting now that this is the last team that we have to defeat in order to reach the Stanley Cup. It's funny how things work. And we called it there too. We've been money with these. But Bobrovsky and Igor, I think the Carolina Hurricanes and the Florida Panthers are very similar. You can even say the Florida Panthers are kind of a version of the Carolina Hurricanes, but with better goaltending. And that is clear. Bob has, we got to give him credit. Bob's been on the money. He was money in the Tampa series, and he was on the money in this last series against Boston. You know, Boston was able to scrub a few games out, but even in that sense, Bob was on his game. You know, he made the big saves when they needed to, and that's what this Florida team is so good at capitalizing on. But with that given said, we all know, I think any hockey insider, anybody who breaks this down, you'd rather have Igor than Bobrovsky coming into this, you know? And I think you have Bob, you have Igor. The truth is that Bob hasn't been playing on Igor's level. Igor, I think, in my mind, has been the best goalie in these playoffs. I think he's the best goalie left remaining in the playoffs. You can make the case for Ottinger. Ottinger's played really well, but I think you got to give the goaltending edge to the Rangers at the end of the day. However, there are some other factors that we'll jump into that could litigate that edge, but I want you to jump in and give your opinion here on the matchup.
Yeah, I've been really hard, like you just mentioned, calling back. We've done a lot of callbacks the last few weeks, and it's because we've had analysts on our show, and I think we've been pretty spot on with a lot of some of our predictions, takes, what have you. Colin Stevenson said it. He said it when we had him on at the trade deadline. The best goaltenders out of the East are Igor Shesterkin and Sergei Bobrovsky. They're the 2 fine goaltenders that can carry a team to the Cup final when need be. And that's why these teams are here. Bob's had a few performances that kept the Panthers in games. Igor has certainly kept the Rangers in games. And we know that watching him night in and night out. The regular season's in the past. Hurricane series is in the past. But if you take the sample of his game 5 and 6 performance, that Igor Shesterkin, let alone, yes, gave up, 3-4 goals, but he really made up. They were performances that by the statistics aren't phenomenal, but in terms of the volume he faced, the quality he faced, I was impressed. And part of that too is that the Carolina Hurricanes and the Florida Panthers, to me, the difference again is that their forward group, the Panthers, can put the puck in the net. And I thought that the Hurricanes just never got the Seth Jarvis. I know he had injuries now, and again, it's in hindsight, but Sebastian Aho, I just didn't feel like their top players were scoring, Whereas right now, their top players are putting goals in the back of the net. I mean, Matthew Tkachuk, 4 goals, Barkov, 5, Verhaeghe, 6, Reinhart, 5. You go down, Brandon Montour from the blue line, 3. Forsling has 2, one of them the game winner last series, Rodriguez with 3. It's up and down the lineup. They're getting those contributions. And I think the offense, in terms of putting the puck in the back of the net, is really coming down to the wire here. And this is why the evolution of Artemi Panarin is going to come to a critical point, because the Rangers will also need the firepower on Sergei Bobrovsky.
Yeah, I think those are great points. One that I want to throw in there that I think a lot of people don't mention to pad Igor, to build our boy up. Not that we need to, but you look at Bob, he's had a couple of games that were doozies in the playoffs, going back to round 1 against Tampa. Tampa was able to score, 5 or 6 goals against Bob in game 4, even though it didn't matter in the long run. The Rangers and Igor haven't had a game like that. You could point to Igor's worst game of the playoffs was probably game 5 against Carolina, but still, Igor kept him in that game, and that game didn't get out of hand until the last 10 minutes. So, actually, less than 10 minutes, but Igor, I'm confident Igor, he hasn't shit the bed. We've seen him in the regular season where we'd be sweating. He'd give up 4 goals in like a span of 10 minutes, at certain points this regular season. He is on the money and he's dangerous. Not only that, but him playing at MSG for majority of the games in the series, game 1, game 2, game 5, I think is huge. He builds off the energy at MSG, the Mecca. So listen, I'm riding high with Igor, Chives. I want to jump in and kind of go game by game here. The Rangers played against the Panthers, because a lot of people, I've seen this a lot on, Mike mentioned the large Twitter universe on last epi. And I think
Yes.
a lot of this this analysis that we're seeing online is a little faulty here. The Panthers led the season series between the Rangers 2-1, but there are a lot of factors in that game. We look at the first game. These two teams played 3 games this year. We look at game number 1. Igor didn't play, Chives. So that outcome of that game automatically is thrown out the window. Remember that game? That was the quick. He made that crazy save with his leg, but Igor didn't play. We didn't have Igor, so that automatically gets thrown out of the window. Then we go to the final game of the season. I'm going to skip the second game for a second. The final game is the game where the Rangers won. However, we won in the shootout, if you call correctly. So for me, that win doesn't count, because we ain't getting a shootout in the series. So it doesn't matter. That win gets thrown out, and another reason why that game gets thrown out is there was no Barkov in that game. And the Panthers had somebody else that was missing too in that game. So it wasn't a full representation. The best game to look at in this series would be the second game we played. It was in the beginning of March. It was game 2 in the season series, and it was a very tightly contested game. We had Wenberg, we had Rempe at that time. They had their full lineup going, and the Panthers won that game. However, it was very, very close. The Panthers scored a goal with 2 minutes left, and then they hit an empty netter. And that was where our boy Sam Reinhart killed us. Well, not our boy, but Sam Reinhart killed us. And that was a game, if you recall, where Panthers scored, Rangers battled back. Panthers scored, Rangers battled back. And that's kind of the same thing we saw in that second game that I would fully expect in this series, where it's going to be a tough battle. And that, to me, that game 2 in the series in the beginning of March is the best indicator of what we're going to see in this series. And by the way, the game-winning goal that the Panthers scored with 2 minutes left, that was a bullshit goal. Igor, I would like to say 95% of the time is not giving up that goal in the playoffs. Chives, your take on all of that.
I love it, Steve-O. I don't really have much to add. The one thing I will add is I guess I do have 2 little things, but that was the game with the Barkov assist. If, our listeners can recall, where he knocked it out of the air to himself.
That's crazy too.
Yeah, and also online, Topher Scott, great Twitter account. He's his whole thing is about mindset as a coach and with young players. He has a podcast. he breaks down video, and he broke down that Reinhardt goal. This Florida Panthers team is intelligent. They're tough as nails. They have the size and compete. And as you mentioned, they also, like, to me, Barkov also represents that they do have elite talent as well. And he might be the one guy that sticks out in that sense, but he's there. And I think this team, the Florida Panthers, have a nice combination of all that. With that, Steve, I want to know your X factors. I have 3, and it's going to be more, I think, about the New York Rangers than anything else. But there are 3 X factors in my book. What are your 3 X factors for this series?
So we'll pound them out here. I'll give you one, you give me one, and we'll go so on, so on. We already mentioned number 1 of mine, Chives. I gotta go Igor with this one. You know, Igor is a key to the series. You know, that's a given one. But Igor has, and there might be certain points of this series where, you know, the Rangers offense, you know, it might be 2-0 Panthers, you know, in any given game. And the Rangers offense, I don't want to say stale, because we really haven't seen the offense minus game 5 against Carolina go stale. But if there ever is a point to that, you know, I don't want to say we got to fully rely on Igor, but if Igor Shesterkin, I've said this way earlier in the season. I remember saying that the Rangers are going to go as far as Igor will take them. And I don't think that will be fully on display. But what I mean by that is let's go to game 5 against Carolina as an example. Let's say it's 2-0 Panthers. I have confidence in our team where we could battle back. I'm saying we need to rely on Igor, just like we saw in game 6 against Carolina, where if Igor can hold, you know, a period strong and not give up anything else, I'm confident that this team and Lavi's going to have these boys coming out, and we could tie it. We've seen it so many times this season, and we led the league in comeback wins. I believe in this team. You know, I said it before on this pod. I'm confident in this team as I've ever been, you know, with this team. This team could battle back. They've shown they got this dog. They've embraced the no-quit mentality. So if Igor could hang on, and in game 6 he did it, you mentioned it, you had a reel yourself that Igor really made some big saves in that third period. And that's what I mean. If Igor could hang on into some of these games where the Floridas jump out, and they jump out quick, and they have done that before. You look at last year's postseason, you look at this year's postseason, they are so good. And even the season series, I think Florida scored first in all 3 of the games. They jump out fast. And I think if Igor could hang on, our team could battle. So Igor is definitely one of my keys to the series. Chives, what do you got for us? Your first key.
I've said one name very often, but the other I don't think enough, and that's Mika Zibanejad and Adam Fox. The New York Rangers need them to perform at as close to their best level as possible, or I don't think they win this series. I think Mika Zibanejad coming into the series, assists, yes, he's been playmaking, and we saw that in Game 6. But goal scoring, you know, I don't want to talk about contract. He has the big contract. He is the Rangers 1C, no doubt. I think his production, he had a goal in game 2 against Washington, and then 2 goals in game 1 against Carolina to put the Rangers up 3-1 in the first game of last series. It has to be there. You cannot gain no goal scoring from Mika Zibanejad, your 1C. And I believe he's the best goal scoring center in the NHL when he's at his best, but he hasn't been. And whether that's injury, I'm not sure. I know he had his numbers were down this year in the regular season, but overall, it just has to be there because, you know, it's going to go bar for bar against the Panthers, and their best players are performing. And I say Adam Fox, we just put up a post today on Instagram, 4 assists in the 10 games. In 2022, he had 5 goals, 18 assists, 23 points in 20 games in the playoffs. I know he must be dealing with an injury. A video surfaced online of the Nick Jensen knee on knee in that Washington series. Same knee. Sebastian Aho injured in November. I asked Adam Fox himself personally if that was the longest he'd ever been out, and he said he's never been on a long-term injury reserve ever in his entire career. as a kid, club hockey, yada yada, college, so on. Adam Fox has to be there too. I know you mentioned, and I tip your cap to the fact he did play pretty well defensively, but I think Mika Zibanejad and Adam Fox are integral to how the Rangers are going to play this season, this series, Steve-O. So what's your second X factor?
Sticking on that same line, I think Panarin. I'm going with Panarin, and not only Panarin, but our second line as a whole, because in the 3 games, small sample size against Florida in the regular season, the second line with Panarin and Trocheck has been our best line against this team. They've lit up the scoreboard in all 3 games. I mean, and you look at the Mika and Kreider line, not really a sample size, but they were quiet against Florida. I think that line only had 1 goal in 3 games. Panarin was huge, Chavs. He had 3 goals. He had 4 points. Lafreniere netted a goal. Trocheck got a goal. This line was cooking against Braub. And Panarin, I think Panarin knows. I think they practiced together with Panarin and Braub. So maybe he could try and exploit something. But Panarin he really needs to show in this series, because there were certain points against Carolina where he was quiet. And again, Chris Kreider put this team on his back. I'm not sure that a Florida Panthers team up and down the lineup is going to allow one player of our team to do the same thing that the Carolina Hurricanes did. So again, this second line, it just makes it so much easier if they come out and they have a strong game. I'm putting a huge part of this on Panarin, because I think he's got a show, and it just makes it easier for the rest of our team. It makes it easier for the third line. It makes it way more easier for the first line. And I think this is the first team, it may only be the only team in the East that they are deep. We're deep too. And that was a strength that everyone gave the Rangers when playing the Capitals, when playing the Hurricanes, that the Rangers are deeper. Now I think it's even strength. It's fair game. So now the Dogs have to show up, and I think Panarin is such a big factor to that, Chavs.
Yeah, so you went into the firepower. I think it's actually also the second factor, which is important to this series, and that's physicality. We don't know how the things are going to match up, but if it's Verhaeghe, Lundell, and Tkachuk against that second line, I'm going to say not only the clutch factor of a Matt Tkachuk, we saw the 4 OT goal, the 2 OT goal last Eastern Conference Final. That guy, he could play like the best player in the NHL when he's on. And so can Panarin, right? We've seen that as well, especially this postseason. With that, though, I think it's going to come down to who can, and to take the Carolina Hurricanes hashtag, cause the most chaos. Matt Tkachuk, Vincent Trocheck, they can score, but how are they going to play off the puck? You mentioned physicality. How underneath the skin can they get? And I think the Rangers cannot back down from that game. They have to go full tilt into that in order to succeed in this series. I know that's, a take. We're going to see how that plays out in game 1 alone, but we know they can turn it on and turn it off. Is Rempe going to play in the series? How are they going to manage that? That's all going to be really important into how this team, I think, how the Rangers play into things. And because we know the Panthers have that, and we've seen it in the playoffs last year and this year. We've seen it from the Rangers in rounds 1 and 2, but I like to see more of it. And I think the more under the skin they can get, either team is going to play a major factor into the series.
All right. Well, Charles, my final key is special teams. This is what set the Rangers apart in round 2 against the Hurricanes. And not only is our power play big, because we could all agree that 5-on-5, sometimes we could go a little stale. But I'm saying special teams because Florida is a very, very good 5-on-5 team. You could even argue that they're better 5-on-5 than they are in their power play. So this is going to be a huge opportunity for us. And again, we dominated Carolina Hurricanes. Carolina had a top-ranked penalty kill. They had the second-ranked power play or first-ranked power play in the regular season, and we were still able to outscore it 7-2. 5 power play goals, 2 shorthanded goals. That's where we excelled on it, and we got outscored on 5-on-5 by Carolina. So again, it's very proven that we could win the special teams game. However, what should be scary for the Rangers is that Florida is a very good team, Chives, at generating a low shot volume against their opponents, meaning that they don't allow their opponents to shoot a lot on net. So we know that this is a team that plays that tight defense. They move the puck well. They play that zone so well. They're a physical team. And in response, their opponents don't get a lot of shots on net. And that's something that we kind of struggled with the Rangers, where we thought, oh shit, here we go again. You look at the Hurricane series, game 5, we didn't get a lot of shots on net. Game 6, we didn't get a lot of shots on net in the first 2 periods, or first 2 periods plus 5 minutes. But the games where we went wrong, we didn't generate. I remember texting you in game 6, and you were like, we need a goal after the first period. I'm like, dog, we need a shot. We got 3 shots in 1 period. I mean, 3 shots in 1 period against Florida is not going to cut it, and if we have 3 shots in a period against Florida, how many shots does Florida going to have on Igor? So again, that's not something we want to go up against. So special teams is going to be so key. And again, if we could ride this momentum that we had on the power play against Carolina, I think we'll be flying high, Chives.
All right. And Steve, to build off of that, you went macro. You went with I think the big story of this series is how the Rangers season has been all year. Played it. Their strength has to be their strength on the power play penalty kill. And they have to be better 5-on-5 against a team that's one of the best in the NHL. With that, I'm going with the micro, a few small things. Line matchups. If Philip Hedl is playing, Dan Rosen just reported that it really sounds like he is. Adam Fox, apparently in the locker room today, also didn't necessarily suggest but smiled at the fact that he had some rest time. It sounds like he might have really be dealing with an injury. So how do those players play into the lineup? Where do they play? Is it going to be, what are the lineups going to be? I'm going to pull that up real quick as I continue speaking. But with that, I also think Vladimir Tarasenko, how key is he going to be in this series? Is he going to be like Kuznetsov with the Hurricanes, where he really did have a major impact in a good way and a bad way at points in the series? Because this is a player the Rangers let walk, and they couldn't sign him by the money, but now he's on the first line, featured next to Alexander Barkov, who I think we talk about underrated. He is now, I don't think, considered, maybe he's still underrated. Okay, maybe it's the market he's in, but we know how elite he is. And he's playing alongside, on the opposite wing, Sam Reinhart, who we not only mentioned is a Ranger killer, but he's been scoring at an insane clip. Now, I'm trying to pull up the lines real quick because I think the lineup is going to be very important for the Rangers. We didn't really mention the fourth line. Nick Cousins. I have not heard a lot about Nick Cousins. He was considered the biggest rat in the NHL, up there with Tom Wilson, Brad Marchand, right? Seriously, Steve, have you heard Cousins' name really in the postseason? I haven't heard it at all.
No. And I'll give you some time to pull that up. But another, not one of my big keys, but another important thing to mention here is that Will Cooley has had an awesome series. He only played 2 games against the Panthers, but he had 2 goals in those 2 games. And I remember hearing his name in one of those games, all the time. He had a big 2 games against the Panthers. And I think that's going to continue and be very key in this series, especially not only, we're not going to be looking to Cooley to score some goals. We'll take it, but we need Cooley to be more physical. Like you said, I fully agree. I love your key right there to wrap that up, because Cooley's going to be such a big part. Again, to truck. I think he's one of the most physical players in the NHL in the postseason. But we're going to need to bring the heat. So I'll allow you to jump back in there.
Yeah, no, with that, 100% agree. And we just talked about that Trocheck line, and you mentioned Panarin, how key he's going to be. If they're not going to allow a lot of shots and not going to allow a lot through, if they're matched up against Matt Tkachuk, it's only going to make that harder. Anton Lundell, a defensive center, now they're 2C, only going to make that harder. And they can go the opposite way and have a guy like Carter Verhaeghe, who's already climbing the all-time list of overtime goals in NHL Stanley Cup playoff history. So This team is the real deal. Now, with that, were you gonna say something, Steve-O?
I was gonna say, you mentioned Verhage. I told you this before the pod, but if it's a 2-2 game, especially if there's like a minute to go, because we've given up a goal with less than a minute 5 times already in this postseason between the Capitals and the Hurricanes. So that's something I'm watching for sure. We'll throw that in as an extra key there. But if Verhage touches the buck in a tie game or an overtime, you already know my blood level will go through the roof. But go ahead.
The Steve-O curse. I mean, listen, we're going to get a lot of off ice good stuff too. I mean, we've seen Paul Maurice's press conferences. Vince Mercogliano today reported the lines for the Rangers: Kreider's, Zibanejad, Roslovic, Panarin, Trocheck. Now, granted, these aren't the matchups. Like, it might not be second line to second line. We know that, but the third line: Hedel left wing, Wenberg 3C, Kakko right wing. Fourth line: Cooley, Goodrow, VC. Do we see Rempe? Do we see Blake Wheeler? Are we going to see them at all this series unless there's an injury? Are they going to work them in? It's all going to be matchup based. And what I do like about Laviolette is we talked about the in-game adjustments. Playing there were points where he had Barclay Goodrow out there with Mika Zibanejad just so they had an extra face-off guy out there. That's all intelligent maneuvers. That's chess, not checkers. That's going to be key to defeating a team that also has that capability within their lineup. They have a lot of guys and a big toolbox.
I like the lineups the way it is. I like introducing Hedel back, having Cooley down on the fourth line. That's how I like it. That's how I would have it. You mentioned good questions. Do we see Wheeler at some point? Do we see Rempe? Do we see your guy Hot Broad jump back into the lineup? I think at some point you probably will. I don't think we'll see Blake Wheeler again. To me, and you could maybe talk about this because you played hockey. I didn't. I've never played hockey, but to be out of the lineup for such of a long time, to come back into such a high intensity game, and it was a leg injury too, you don't know how he's going to affect him skating wise. He might be a little slow. I just seems like it's too much to ask for. And for him, like Hedel, it's different, for Wheeler, leg injury, it just seems different for me. I don't know. I haven't played hockey, so you can tell me maybe it's different. But for me, Blake Wheeler seems like a long shot.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I can't speak to his injury. I think, from his quotes, it was about proving to himself, proving to his family, which I think obviously in his personal life is a great personal example. He's up there in age. I believe he's 37. And with that, it's just I don't know if it's about the leg injury. I also felt like he struggled a little bit with speed to begin with. I think he's a good veteran to have with the team practicing and to be a part of the team. If anything goes wrong, you have him in the lineup. But otherwise, I just can't see where he would fit into the lineup. Like, who do you remove? I think it's really like if Roslovic has a really bad game one, then we see Wheeler, right? But I don't think listen, good on him. If he forces his way into the lineup, good on him. But I think he's going to have to force himself in. Like, he has to make himself almost like irremovable. And it seems like, at least from the practice lines today, he's been working with Edstrom and Rempe, so with the extras. So with that, I think we can really put that, I wouldn't say to rest, but I don't think I think those are the circumstances we see 17 back in the lineup.
And don't get me wrong, I want to root for Wheeler. That video of him pounding on the glass after Game 3 in Carolina, I'd love to see him out there. We can't take that risk. I think you probably, there's a good chance you might see Rempe. Maybe he gets a start down in Florida for Game 3. Maybe he gets a start in Game 2, depending on what the result of Game 1 is, and especially what the result of the physicality level is. You might see Rempe there. Maybe you might see Johnny Brosniski inserted in a Game 4, Game 5. I definitely think the lineups will be different. But back to Wheeler really quick. Remember, he played a majority of the first half of the season, or the first 30% of the season, on that first line, and he had no success. So we're going to now slot him down into – you made a good point. We're going to slot him back down into the lineup now where, he had a nice success on the first line. He looked slow and sluggish, not injured. I mean, what are you going to expect from down there? So I do agree with you on that point. Sam Reinhart makes me nervous, Chives. I mean, he is electrifying. And for some reason, I don't know why, he's had the Rangers numbers. Whether it was last year, whether it was 2 years ago, he's killed us. So he's definitely somebody that, you know, he could concoct, the kryptonite against Igor. He's definitely somebody that I would be circling for sure. We got to have a strong defensive alignment against him.
Yeah. Now the one thing I will say too is let's take a little flight and a different perspective here. I don't think the Boston Bruins lineup, they were very well coached. They had one elite player, and their other one was injured, and he's also 39 years old. Jeremy Swayman had a series. It seems like the consensus thought out there is that Swayman kept the Bruins in the series and was really the only performer. In a similar way we saw with Shilovs in that Game 7 with the Edmonton series in that second round, Oilers Canucks. I don't know if the Panthers have really faced as deep and talented as a team as the Rangers. I really don't. Tampa, I would consider, but it just wasn't the same year for Tampa that they've had. I also don't think that I think their depth has fallen off a little bit in the last, this season specifically. Yeah, do they have pieces? 100%. I think I just don't know if adding Filipino to me is a key because if Heedle can return to any form that we've seen him, the 2022 playoff type of Heedle we saw, even close to that, I think that's going to be a major factor in this series.
Not even to levels of that extent, Charles, but even if he gives us the same performance he gave us in Game 3 against Carolina, I'm okay with that because he was getting in there. He was fast. He was energizing. He was getting quality scoring chances in that game. So I'd 100% sign up to take that Heedle for the series against Florida because I want those scoring chances. Again, Florida is one of the best teams in the league. I'm saying it now because I guarantee you we'll be saying it again in the series. They don't give up a lot of good scoring opportunities. So that is definitely something that we have to watch out for. And again, that's why one of my keys is special teams because if we get on the power play, then we start to incorporate some good scoring opportunities. And I think we got to take advantage of it. We got to take advantage of it because, again, it's a scary Florida team. But again, I'm confident. I don't know about you. Are you worried? Because to be honest with you, I'm not worried. Maybe it's the beginning of the series. I don't think either of us were worried against Carolina, but I'm excited. I'm excited and I'm confident coming into this.
Yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic just because I don't know if we've seen the most out of Kachuk and Sam Bennett, and I know what those guys are capable of. I think it's the Rangers' biggest test. Carolina was a big test, but I think Florida. I had the feeling they would be the bigger test if say the Rangers got there, and I also think on the other side of the Western Conference, say the Rangers win this series, it's another really, really solid two teams lined up to have a Stanley Cup final berth out of the West. So, yeah, I do think all the teams that are in it right now are really the best of the best. They're the teams that have earned their way and have earned the right to be in this position. But they also, I think, were, even in the regular season, some of the best NHL teams. You can't ask for better. I do have confidence in this Ranger squad, though. I mean, you saw what Kreider said at the intermission, Vincent Trocheck. They're light about the game. It doesn't seem like they're not too dialed in, but too hard on themselves. Like they're able to joke around a little bit in the pressers and keep things loose, but they also they do have this air of confidence, I think, from the locker room. That's where it stems from. I think the coaching staff's also done a phenomenal job managing a lot of different things this postseason already. So they're going to have to, again, we mentioned that. I think that's going to be a key to this series as well, because this Florida's team is a friggin' handful, whether it's Paul Maurice at the in the post-game interviews or on the ice when they're, causing a 10-car pileup.
Now, this is something I just want to bring up now for fun. I have written down here in my notes. I was flipping through the pages. This is back a week before the season started. and this was our Puck Talk season preview. And we were talking about lines. And I think it's funny. I had written here, these were the lines that were projected. You want to hear them?
Yeah, go
We've come
for
a
it.
long way. We had Kreider, Zibanejad, Wheeler. We had Panarin, Trocheck, and Barclay Goodrow. Lafreniere, Hito, Kako. And then the fourth line, Veezy, Bonino, Pitlick. See how far we've come from that. And I
Yeah.
think it's definitely something. I think it's more credit to Laviolette, and it's more a testament to what the foundations of the mentality of this team. And again, that's going to be on the forefront in this series. 4 games away, Chives, from the Stanley Cup Finals. However, that sounds much easier than it actually is.
Much easier, Steve-O. I agree. This is going to be one of the best series I think we can ask for, not only as, from the Rangers side of things, but the NHL in general. The star power, the physicality, it's all there. This is the first time both teams have met since the 1997 Stanley Cup playoffs. That was when Wayne Gretzky was a New York Ranger alongside Mark Messier. It's been a long time since they met. In our lifetime, you and I have never seen the Panthers succeed as well as they have in the last 2 seasons. So it's really a spectacle to see another Florida team in the conference final against the New York Rangers. 2 out of the last 3 years they've made it. The last time they made the Stanley Cup final a decade ago, 2014. This series can propel them there. They will face either the Edmonton Oilers or Dallas Stars. If they can get through, easily the jungle, the toughest, I think one of the toughest series we may ever see them play in up to this point. And certainly their hashtag, it's time to hunt. It is time to hunt for the Rangers.
I like that. You're right on that point where we never, going back to our middle school days, our high school days, Florida was just non-existent. Everyone was kind of like, Florida's still in the league. That's how bad they were. I never hated Florida, compared to like Carolina. Oh boy, I hate Carolina. By the way, I don't know if anyone listening or you, Chives, if you caught they had the season review pressers, the Carolina Hurricanes. And Aho sounded like a complete crybaby in his end of the year presser. If anybody has the chance to go check that out, go watch that because you could tell he's mega salty. And I love it. Jake Gensel, too, another thing I wanted to point out, quickly before we wrap up. I don't think he's going to stay in Carolina, man. I got the sense in his end of the year presser that he's out. I just didn't get the sense. You get it again. Anybody listening could go back and look at it. It's online. You can go on YouTube. But I just didn't get the sense. While I was watching that, really quick, I don't want to deviate because we talked about this with Mike. 2 spots that I could see getting Jake Gensel. Toronto Maple Leafs, I think, would be an awesome fit for Jake Gensel. I think that really would be an ideal fit. And the Nashville Predators. That's just a quick thought I had, but I think those are 2 spots that could land Gensel. Do you have a thought on that?
Well, I think already, speaking of Nashville, I think they've set an interesting standard for the trade market already. They traded Brian McDonough back to the Tampa Bay Lightning. So that's odd. You don't usually see trades going down while the playoffs are still going on, certainly just after the second round ended. So it's going to be interesting. I like those takes. I think we revisit them in the summer. But right now, all eyes are on the 24-hour. Like I said to you, the Rangers, they had a 10-day break, they had a 5-day break, and yet it always feels like there's a game the next night. It's going to be intense. I'm ready for what's ahead. Should be great hockey.
Should be fantastic hockey, and it's going to be the longest 24 plus hours of the year. I guarantee you that. That'll wrap us up here on this episode of Puck Talk CS. 4 games away, but again, it's going to be a long 4 games. Chives and I, plus Mike, will be here to break it up for you throughout the series. So we'll be here. Stay tuned for that. LGR, everybody. Always remember, it's just the luck of the puck.